Hi everybody, we're going to talk about mitosis. Mitosis is a process that cells go through. So before we talk about what it is exactly, we're going to just talk about what it means to grow. And I want you just to look at this little baby. This is a newborn baby, and this baby probably has thousands of cells. But if you look at this little baby, this is a baby that's a little bit bigger, and this little baby has even more cells than the first one. This young little person has even more cells, so that as we grow, we get more and more cells. When we're finally a young adult, yes, that's Selena Gomez, we have even more cells. And finally, when we are adults, Beyonce and, of course, Jay-Z, and just in case you didn't recognize, that's Blue Ivy, that's their baby. When you're an adult, you have millions and millions of cells. So I just want you to think about for a second, how do you grow from being this little baby, because we were all once this little baby, to a young adult or an adult, and how do our cells make more of themselves? So we're going to learn about that today. Another thing that happens during this process, or another reason that this process happens, rather, another reason that this process happens is to repair damaged cells. So I want you to look carefully at this right here. This is just a simple paper cut, and this is also just another little cut, and you can imagine you've probably had little cuts here and there along the way, and they have healed, and eventually they will look like this, and then eventually you won't even see that anymore. And how does that happen? So how do these skin cells make more of themselves until that cut on your finger or on your foot or wherever it might be no longer exists? So that's what we're talking about today, is how do cells make more of themselves so that we can grow and so that we can heal. The process is called mitosis. It happens in 4 steps. Those 4 steps are called prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. A phase is just a step, so this is the step that is the step, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. And the reason that we showed it to you like this is that sometimes people remember this process as PMAT, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Okay? So PMAT. This process starts with one cell. That cell is called a parent cell, and from that parent cell, 2 daughter cells form. And so these are kind of new vocabulary words, and this is actually what it's called. So you might want to jot it down in your notebook that a parent cell is the original cell that you start out with, and the daughter cell, or the daughter cells, are the 2 cells that you get when the process is all done. Okay, so the parent cell is what you start out with, kind of like if you start with your parents and then you are the children, the daughters. We never call them son cells. I don't know why. People have asked me. I have no idea why. But in science, they're called parent cell and daughter cells. Okay, before we talk about mitosis, we're going to talk a little bit, just teeny little bit, about the life cycle of a cell. And cells go through a life cycle, and for most of the cycle of the life, for most of the life of a cell, for most of the life of a cell, the cell is just growing. And so in this phase called interphase, in interphase, the cell is growing. And what happens during interphase is a very curious thing. At some point during interphase, DNA starts to replicate, and replicate means, of course, make a copy of itself. So the DNA starts to replicate, and that's a signal for the cell to start to go through mitosis, to start the prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase process. Okay, so during interphase, cells hang out in interphase for most of their life, and then only when the chromosomes have duplicated or have copied themselves does that signal the cell to, okay, get to work, do some work, and make more of yourself. Okay? You can also think about it like this, where the cell kind of hangs out. It's got all of its chromosomes, and as the DNA starts to replicate, this is called interphase, right? Interphase. When the DNA replicates or makes a copy of itself, replicate means the same as duplicate. And then we have the process of mitosis happening over here. Okay, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about interphase. And remember, interphase is when the cells are hanging out for most of their life cycle. The chromosomes are hanging out inside the nucleus. This is representing the nucleus. This, of course, is my cell. These are just the edges of the cell. And these are my chromosomes. And in this cell, I only have 3 chromosomes. I have a long brown one, I have a middle-sized green, and I have a short, stubby little blue one. Okay? Now, the first thing that happens, like I said just a few seconds ago, is that the chromosomes are going to start to duplicate. So the brown one makes a copy of itself, the green one makes a copy of itself, and the little blue one makes a copy of itself. So this is what's happening at interphase. And remember, that's going to signal the cell, hey, get to work. Start working. You got to get to prophase. So now we have prophase. And in prophase, the chromosomes are going to organize themselves in pairs, and they're going to find their partner. And we usually represent them as X's. So they find their pair. And then the second important thing that happens during prophase is that the membrane around the nucleus disappears. So watch what happens. The membrane around the nucleus disappears, and the chromosomes are just kind of hanging out inside the cell. Now we have metaphase. Metaphase is when the chromosomes line up on the spindle fibers in the middle of the cell. So these guys right here, these are called spindle fibers. You don't really need to know that, but they kind of line up on the spindle fiber in the middle of the cell. And this is how I remember it, right? The M is for middle, M is for metaphase. So in metaphase, they're in the middle. Metaphase, they're in the middle. In anaphase, the chromosomes start to separate and they move to opposite sides of the cell. And they stay along these little spindle fibers. They're kind of like roads or pathways that the chromosomes can take. So this guy is going to go to this side, this guy's going to go to this side, right? These 3 are going to go here, and these 3 are going to go here. In telophase, new cell membranes start to form. So watch really carefully what happens. See that little green line that happened? Watch, I'll do it again. There's that little green line. That's representing the cell membrane that is starting to form. And then in the end, we will have 2 cells identical. We will have a long brown, a middle green, and a short blue, and a long brown, a middle green, and a short blue. And this is exactly what we started with, right? We started with 3 chromosomes, and now we have 2 cells with 3 chromosomes in them. These are called identical daughter cells. They are absolutely identical. This is also called asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction. Okay, so this is mitosis in an actual cell. Here we have prophase, metaphase in the middle, anaphase being pulled apart, and the cell membranes being formed during telophase. You can stop watching here, or if you want to listen to a little bit more, I'm going to just keep going for about another 3 minutes. Interphase is a time in a cell's life when it is growing, and you can see inside, this is an actual cell, the chromosomes are kind of hanging out, they're starting to duplicate. Maybe this is a duplication here. Here we have prophase, and remember in prophase they're already duplicated and they're finding their match. So here's the chromosomes finding their match. Also, there's no nucleus anymore. So here we can kind of see the nuclear membrane in interphase. That's the nucleus of the cell. But over here in prophase, we can't really see the nucleus because the nucleus has disappeared. Here we have metaphase. Remember, meta, the M is middle, so the chromosomes are lining up in the middle of the cell. And here we have anaphase, and you can see those spindle fibers right in here. It's kind of cool, actually. You can see the spindle fibers in anaphase. And finally, in telophase, I did it with a little graphic, but this is the cell membrane starting to form for this cell, and the cell membrane starting to form on here for this cell. Okay, so mitosis is a process. It is when cells make exact copies of themselves. Super, super important that you know it's a process, and it's when they make an exact copy. Exact copy. How often does it happen? Skin cells every 2 weeks, every 4 months for red blood cells, liver cells once a year, and brain cells almost never can duplicate. So please take care of your brain cells. And what this means is to please don't do drugs, don't do alcohol, don't smoke, don't do anything that would hurt your brain because you can't make those cells again. And finally, a final word just to recap, mitosis is necessary for the growth of the organism. Remember, we started out with the baby and we ended up with Beyonce and Jay-Z. So we have to get more cells by growing and also for replacement of injured and worn out cells. And that has to do with our skin cells when we got that paper cut. So we replace injured, worn out cells by making more cells, and we grow by making more cells. And this is the process of making more cells that are exactly the same as what we started out with. Okay, thanks, bye.